boa tarde, sejam bem-vindos de volta. Daremos continuidade às nossas palestras. Nossa próxima palestra terá o tema A Energia Eólica na Produção de Hidrogênio Verde. Nossa palestrante é a senhora Elbia Ganon. Ela é presidente executiva da Associação Brasileira de Energia Eólica, AB Eólica. Seja muito bem-vinda, senhora Elbia.
A energia eólica na produção do hidrogênio verde. Quando nós estamos falando da produção do hidrogênio verde, necessariamente nós temos que falar da produção de hidrogênio verde a partir de recursos limpos e renováveis, como é o caso da energia eólica, como é o caso da energia solar, da biomassa, do biogás e outras fontes renováveis que o Brasil possui. Então, em primeiro lugar, vamos falar em que contexto essa discussão está inserida. É naturalmente uma discussão que tem um contexto mais amplo da temática mudanças climáticas, busca pela economia de baixo carbono e transição energética. E o Brasil, ele tem se colocado como um importante ator nesse processo da transição energética, tendo em vista a quantidade de recursos renováveis que o país possui e, sobretudo, a competitividade desses recursos renováveis, dada a inovação tecnológica que tem ocorrido na indústria de renováveis global, e o Brasil tem se beneficiado bastante desse processo, desde que começou seus investimentos em energia eólica a partir de 2004, 2005, e que teve mais força a partir de 2011, 2012. Hoje a eólica já é a segunda fonte de geração da matriz. Recentemente, no mês de abril especificamente, a AB Eólica fez um reposicionamento da sua marca, tendo em vista os trabalhos que vem realizando, principalmente nos últimos 4, 5 anos, associados à energia eólica offshore e também a novas formas de geração de energias renováveis que podem ser combinadas com a produção de energia eólica ou que podem ser derivadas da produção de energia eólica. Estou falando de baterias, estou falando de hidrogênio verde e também de projetos híbridos. Diante disso, a gente tem recebido com muita frequência investidores que eram de outros setores que estão fazendo a transição energética, como são as empresas da indústria de óleo e gás que estão fazendo a sua transição energética e investindo fortemente em energias renováveis. E a associação, ela tem se modificado bastante no sentido de ampliar o seu rol de associados. E essas empresas, tanto as empresas do setor de óleo e gás, mas empresas também, recentemente tivemos a associação de uma empresa de baterias, empresas específicas de produção de hidrogênio, específicas de offshore e empresas de renováveis de forma geral. Então, a associação tem se modificado bastante, até pela própria demanda do mercado e a demanda dos investidores, e tem dado suporte a esses investidores. A discussão aqui colocada da produção de hidrogênio e dos investimentos em energia eólica, ela está no âmbito de uma discussão global, como nós sabemos, principalmente devido ao acirramento do clima, das discussões associadas às mudanças climáticas, e os investimentos em energia eólica lá fora têm ocorrido com uma velocidade muito alta. Vamos lembrar que no ano de 2020 o mundo bateu recorde de instalação eólica com 95,3 gigawatts, e a tendência é que esses investimentos ainda aumentem.
Tendency is that this will change, and so the news that we hear, 2020, the record, the global record in 2021 as well, a very huge installed capacity, close to what was in 2020, and Brazil is an important player in this process because it's the sixth country in installed capacity. In 2012, the company occupied 15th position. In terms of new investments, it's the third country that invested most in wind power in the world, and I'm still only talking about onshore wind power projects. And at this moment, we're structuring our regulatory base, the economic base, and also infrastructure to receive investments in offshore wind. Now, in this international context that I've just mentioned, and that in 2020, this is what the world was at. In 2021, 93.6 gigawatts. Now, what can we highlight here that is worth reflecting upon is that the year that we broke the records for installation, offshore wind farms, we installed 6.9 gigawatts. And now, in 2021, we've installed a huge capacity as well, 93.6 gigawatts. 21 gigawatts came from offshore. So we broke offshore installation records in 2021, and this number was threefold greater than the number that we had in 2020. And so this needs to be highlighted. The world has installed today in total 780 gigawatts when we're talking about these onshore projects, and around 57 gigawatts when we're talking about offshore. Regardless of the quality of installation, the global leadership is China. I mean, China is the country that invests most. They occupy first place in installed capacity, and this will possibly continue for a long time now, bearing in mind the size of the country. China grows almost one Brazil a year in terms of installed capacity, and so it's natural that they will lead this process of investments. And like I mentioned, Brazil is already the sixth country in the world. The US is in second place. And when we're talking about offshore, we have investments in the UK and second, in Germany third. In all of these countries, a strong movement of investments in renewables, especially wind, and recent plans for investments, especially from the UK, are doubling investments in renewables, be it for seeking low-carbon economy, and most recently, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, where countries are starting to understand that they need to obtain energy security, and this will come from investments in renewables, because then you guarantee your national sovereignty in investments, because you're going to produce your own energy. And so this is a very relevant geopolitical issue that we see in most countries that are discussing investments. And so energy is responsible for more than 70% of global emissions, and the other 30% are other production processes. So in this way, it's very relevant to have this discussion, since energy transition is totally necessary, bearing in mind the weight of energy in global emissions and therefore in climate change as well. Now, in terms of this scenario, knowing that we need to avoid that the temperature will increase above 1.5 degrees Celsius above industrial levels, that today something that we heard is that this heat wave we're seeing in Europe, the forest fires in California, so
nós já estamos chegando no limite daquilo que se considera
And so that's the limit of what we consider reasonable for peace in humanity. And so otherwise we're going to have many disasters. Now, in this context, how can wind power contribute? According to data from last year, we need to increase our investments fourfold in wind power so that we can reach net zero objectives. And so our future in terms of investments in renewables is virtuous, and that investments in wind also will be virtuous in terms of this very relevant scenario. Now, thinking about Brazil is going towards energy transition, occupying a very favorable position, bearing in mind that in terms of electricity matrix, we have 60% coming from hydro. Today's second place, we have wind. And this shows that our electric matrix is 83% renewable. And so our homework now is easier, if you will, since our electric matrix is so renewable. And when we talk about energy matrix, the situation is not different. Around 48% of our energy matrix, and we understand as energy matrix the use of energy for other purposes like the use of fuels, heating, and industrial processes. We have 48% of our matrix that's renewable, where the global average is around 13%. So our energy matrix is not that difficult. Now, although it's simple, it's a major challenge, and that's why we've been discussing about so many technological possibilities for the production of renewable energy. Now, when we look specifically at wind and onshore,
esses 22 gigawatts que nós temos instalados, eles estão concentrados fortemente no Nordeste brasileiro.
Centered in the northeast of Brazil, Rio Grande do Norte, Bahia, Ceará, and also investments in the south. Brazil has a huge wind power potential, and this is concentrated in these regions. Now, when we look towards the future, what do we have that's important? I mean, this graph here shows only what is already contracted or under construction. There's no data here that's just, trying to look at the future. This is real data. 2022, at the end of this period with around 26 gigawatts installed capacity. In 2023, we're going to close with 23 gigawatts after 36, 37, and so on, without counting on new projects that will be contracted 22, 23, and other years as well. And so our growth will be exponential. So more and more investments in wind, and like I mentioned, we're already working to structure offshore wind. Besides energy issues or electricity and renewables, we also see the importance of social environmental benefits that are important for wind power, and so it's very important to highlight the ESG factor in these investments. And recently we published some studies showing that the regions that received investments, and with a highlight for the Northeast and the states that received investments, wind,
para o crescimento do índice de desenvolvimento humano municipal em torno de 20%,
around 20%, and the GDP around 21%.
Além disso, quando nós olhamos
And
do
so,
ponto de vista macroeconômico, quais são os impactos que
what
a
are the
energia
impacts
eólica, que o
that
setor eólico pode trazer
the
para
energy
essas
sector,
economias? A gente tem que, para cada R$ 1 investido em energia eólica, nós trazemos de volta
we
para o PIB
will bring
cerca
back
de
to our GDP
2,9
around
reais.
6.9
Além
reais.
disso, a energia
Furthermore,
eólica é capaz de gerar cerca
wind
de
power is
11
capable of
postos de
generating
trabalho por
11
cada megawatt
jobs
instalado.
for each
E
megawatt
que,
installed.
quando nós fazemos
And when we do the
de emissões, e
calculations,
aí esse cálculo de emissão é o custo, o próprio custo social do carbono, o Brasil vai ter um custo evitado no período de 2016 a 2024.
and from 2024 to 2026, we're talking about 60, 70 billion. And that will be the contribution of Brazil to the global economy with investments in wind power. And so it's as if we were saving 70 billion from the global GDP. I understand this transition process as an important energy transformation process. The macroeconomic impacts, multiplying effects that we have, and social impacts as well. We are facing a unique opportunity to transform the Brazilian system, the Brazilian economy, by means of investments in energy.
Que o mundo está apresentando forte engajamento do setor financeiro a partir de 2020 e o fato de que hoje,
and also the fact that today, when we talk about investments, we cannot forget about ESG.
Que é o conceito de meio ambiente social numa estrutura de governança adequada aos negócios. Desta forma, nós enxergamos oportunidades no papel dos consumidores, principalmente na pauta ambiental e social, como mencionei, até porque o Brasil está passando
because Brazil is going through a process of change. We're modernizing the sector. I'm sorry.
Apenas para comunicá-la que faltam 2 minutos para encerrar, tá bom?
Amém. Obrigada.
Obrigada.
Esses investimentos e essa mudança no setor elétrico, nessa abertura do mercado livre, vai trazer uma grande possibilidade de investimentos. Além disso, nós temos
Furthermore,
a possibilidade de
we have the possibility
a partir dos investimentos no setor de infraestrutura, com destaque para a energia. Nós temos uma possibilidade de
also the possibility for exports when you modify the energy matrix, producing green commodities, we can export our electric power through green commodities and new technologies. And new technologies, we're looking at the production process, hybrid production, solar and wind, offshore that we're working with, digitization of processes. So we're talking about the relationship between green hydrogen and offshore wind. And it makes sense. So these are the gigawatts of projects. This really shows the potential of the offshore market, so that we have some challenges.
Para a construção e consolidação dessa indústria, que muito em breve teremos, e nós temos que pensar no hidrogênio verde, principalmente associada a essa questão do clima. O Brasil tem um potencial enorme.
Brazil has a huge potential,
principalmente
mainly the northeast.
Não só os recursos
not only the resources east, not only the resources, but our own onshore resources and so many other technologies that we can produce in terms of renewables. And Brazil has the possibility of leading this whole process, energy transition from its renewable energy, and we can export this from the replacement of commodities, green commodities, or production or exportation. I mean, if we're going to make green hydrogen, that means, the renewable energies in Brazil, onshore and offshore as well. And so we have this entire possibility with the entire infrastructure for our business. And so green hydrogen undoubtedly is the present of investments in renewables in Brazil. And we are quite excited with this whole process. And so thank you for the opportunities. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Always after we have Q&A, and we have 10 minutes. And I have already 3 questions here for you. Here we go, first question. Here we go. What is the main difficulty for green hydrogen production? Well, in Brazil, I don't think we have so many difficulties. I mean, I think we went through a process of understanding. You know, this began in 2020. Starting from 2020, and after this we studied this potential, but the problems that Brazil may be facing are the same problems that the world is facing. I mean, we know that hydrogen needs to overcome some difficulties, be it technology or transportation, or in terms of scale. But this process is already taking place. I mean, I understand that Brazil is ready. A hydrogen plant for the state, Gel, and this was really larger scale projects showing that now is what we're doing.
Ok, muito obrigada.
Okay, thank you.
Tela, por gentileza. Obrigada. Nossa segunda pergunta.
Okay, the second question is this.
Qual a sua opinião quanto ao
What is your opinion
vivendo a produção de hidrogênio verde aqui no Brasil?
Of green hydrogen here in Brazil?
Bom, pelo que estudamos
and from what we've studied,
os investimentos em hidrogênio,
investments in green hydrogen,
produção, exportação e
production,
mercado dinâmico, ele é esperado mais para o final da década. E essa discussão ela estava acontecendo principalmente no início deste ano de 2022. Com o processo de aceleração da necessidade de investimentos algumas em estudos no Brasil,
and some studies we've seen in Brazil and others,
estão mostrando que já está no final da década para alguma coisa.
And we would never leave this for 2025 or 2027.
Pergunta e última. Com relação à energia eólica
In terms of offshore,
aí mais ou menos a curto prazo?
you think this can be short term?
Do que é o conceito de curto prazo. Quando a gente está falando de infraestrutura,
Yeah, when we're talking about infrastructure, short term, it's 5 years, you know. So if we're talking about infrastructure in a 5-year timeline, yeah, that's short term. We're working with the regulation, and soon we're going to have the main guidelines. And from this process, we will have the auctions. And once these auctions are ready, entrepreneurs will be able to expedite their licensing with IBAMA, and will be ready to take on projects. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you next time. Thank you very much.